without a doubt, I think it's by far the best league in England.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV's Premier League show. We have been on a little bit of a hiatus here. Myself and Paul were not keeping up with our weekly commitments to this program, but we promise you we are back. We are going to be here each week, or we will get some fill-in hosts for ourselves to take us through the rest of this Premier League season. And we're going to start this week with looking at match week 26. So, Paul, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I guess it's not too late for a New Year's resolution. I mean, we're almost in March, but it's good. We can do this now.
Well, it's kind of like I thought. You know, we were going to get back on track when the new year started. I think that was pretty much what we said. We'll get through the holidays, and then we allowed the holidays to roll, well, right up till almost St. Patrick's Day. But that's about a holiday that me and you resonate with. One that, you know, basically separates itself around kind of mediocre music, mediocre food, and really, really good drinking, which is really the best part about any old holiday. So, we're going to get into the Premier League here, and we are going to talk about match week 26. We'll look at some of the matches on the weekend, and then, of course, also take a look at the table, talk a little bit about some of the big news. But I don't think we could start talking about the Premier League today on this Monday morning, the February 26th, without talking about yesterday's League Cup final. Saw Liverpool's, you know, as some would say, Child Brigade, Youth Choir, whatever you want to say, whatever your insert punchline joke is. This is a nice picture. I really like this one because it actually shows most of the players actually in uniform, which makes you realize how few of them you actually know who they are. As a Liverpool supporter, and then we'll talk the neutral side of it out of it and talk a little bit more about the match. As a Liverpool supporter, how stoked and excited are you, Paul, waking up today knowing this group were able to secure that trophy yesterday?
I mean, it was just such an enjoyable cup final, I think, because, like, I mean, I think this is immense pressure to win for Jurgen's final year, right? But I also think, like, for me, at least, I felt like a lot of the pressure was off, considering the fact that this is essentially a starting 11 that's just basically gutted of all of its, like, major pieces. So, like, I think we felt like we were kind of playing with house money in a way. I think if you're Chelsea and you lost 5, now 6 finals, you know, the pressure's on that side of the coin, really. So I think that made this a little bit more enjoyable. Yeah, obviously the result was just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, one part that always makes it fun is it is nice that they finally scored again in a final since the Champions League final. The last person to score in a final for Liverpool in regular time was Divock Origi, and that's kind of ridiculous. But it was very enjoyable, in my opinion. It was fun. It showed a lot of character, and I think that it helped the manager, I think, also. Not that he needs to cement himself any further or create any more of the allure, but I think it's days like this that it do make you realize he's a special, special man. Like, he knew there was a very good chance that match was going to penalties, and he still sent out a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds to go on, knowing some of them were going to have to take penalties possibly to win a trophy at Wembley Stadium, and he didn't care. Because he was like, this is what we got to do. This is who I have available to me. I was in the pub, and when I saw Gomez coming up, I actually looked down to my buddy, and I was like, he might actually have the balls to move Bradley to the right wing and Elliott back to midfield. And he looks at me and goes, no, maybe a back three. And I was like, there's a better chance the kid plays on the wing. And like a second later, the announcer's like, I think he's putting young Connor Bradley up to right wing. Yep. And I'm thinking to myself, this kid went from wearing 84 at Liverpool and deputizing for arguably the most talented right back in the world, whether he's is that or not right now as a player is a different story. To in a cup final having to basically replace the best right wing in the world. And he did that within 15 minutes of himself and still found a way to get under the skin of the opposing captain to the point where he goaded the guy to get a yellow card, which I know people in the pub were like, oh, screw Chilwell making a kid get a yellow card. And I thought to myself, I don't know, man, that was some shithousery, in my opinion, by Bradley right there. I kind of love it because now a fullback just picked up a yellow card who has to defend the rest of the match. And I'm playing right wing, so I should be pretty much in good shape. So I just thought it was an amazing feat by them. You mentioned Chelsea's shortcomings. What does it say about Chelsea to the fact that for the second half and all of extra time, they were basically playing against an academy side? And the manager admitted they were playing for penalties at points of extra time.
I mean, I think when I look at the situation, I think this is the difference in continuity and identity, right? Like, I mean, I think when you look at the Liverpool setup, there's a distinct system, and everybody knows that system all the way coming up to the youth ranks till the time they graduate into the senior side, right? And the amount of turnover that Chelsea's had in the last 10 years doesn't allow for any continuity in the setup. And I think what's interesting is when you look at the two sides, you know, they talk about Klopp's kids and all this stuff, and yeah, that's how it ended. But when this game started, Chelsea actually has the younger side, average age, right, across the starting 11. And I think it's a real difference. Like, you know, they had that article on Kirkby that came out and talked about the academy and how, like, these kids aren't allowed to drive certain cars. And that may seem extreme or that may seem ridiculous, but I think that develops a mindset where these kids don't feel that they've arrived. And there's a hunger that I think is there to get there, not only like financially, but from a footballing standpoint that I think can get lost when these kids have access to everything so early. So if you look at Chelsea's side, my point of that is that I think this side feels younger because they're academy kids coming up, where the Chelsea side may technically be younger on that first starting 11, but these are kids that are basically have come up as wonder kids and essentially been handed very large contracts very early on and starting football very early on, where a lot of these kids, you know, 3 of them had like 11 caps, senior caps combined, you know? So I think there's a difference in experience. There's a different level to these kids, even in their finances and in where they're at in their careers, really. I think that's the main difference is like there's academy kids and then these kids are already established stars that are trying to grow their own legacies. And I think when you look at the two, I think like system wins every time versus a group of individuals, right? And I think that Chelsea they haven't quite figured out how to work as a collective versus, you know, 18 individuals hand-picked stars across multiple managers for a lot of them too.
Yeah, they're still figuring it out, and I do think there will be better days with this squad ahead of them as time goes on. There's a lot of talent there, and I think they're actually acquiring some solid pieces once they find someone that can kind of mesh and create a cohesive product. I think at times they've looked okay, and we've all said like, oh, it looks like they're turning the corner, and then they take big steps backwards. I just think as long as they're trying to figure out how to make Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez work at the same time on the pitch together, especially why Caicedo is not really at optimal form. I mean, they spent so much money on him, they have to play him into form. And I think that's part of the problem as well. And obviously he's struggling with the betting in. And I think that's happened to a lot of their players, you know, outside of maybe Cole Palmer. And, you know, they're still getting a little bit out of Sterling. They're getting a little bit here and there. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. If we jump across Merseyside to the blue side of town, they were making noise today and news for a different reason. They're not celebrating it like their first trophy in 50 years or 20 years or 30 years or whatever it would be. But I think they'll take these 4 points that they've been given back that pulls them out of the relegation zone. So as of this morning, the independent appeals board ruled that a 6-point deduction was what they felt would be fair and balanced adjudication for the breaking of the profitability and sustainability rules that Everton was found guilty of, that earlier in the season they had their 10-point deduction. So we'll look at the table a little later, Paul, and talk about what you think these extra 4 points coming back to them means. But let me ask you, if you are Forest, Wolves, and the rest of the folks who are sitting waiting for news of a potential points reduction or additional points reduction even for Everton coming, would this give you positive feelings? Would this make you more nervous that there's probably more sanctions to come, which is why they're kind of giving points back? Do you think this is the precedent that the league has been waiting to unwield?
Well, I think if they're lessening it regardless, it's good. I guess I would look at it as positive. Anytime they're going to lessen something, I mean, maybe there's more stuff coming down, but at least they like set the standard there, and they thought, hey, like if we apply the standard across the board, that's going to be too harsh. Yeah, like that's how I read that. So I think you only got to look at it as a good thing if you're those clubs. I does feel like they're establishing precedent in these smaller cases, right? Before they go for the big ones. Like that's what it really feels like. It feels like they're going through the motions, almost treating these like trial runs and setting some precedent before they get into the big stuff with City and some of the big boys here.
Yeah, I think the Chelsea and City situations are going to be massive. And then I think as time goes on, they're just preparing themselves in case Spurs or West Ham or one of these other clubs that has kind of spent above their means at times. And I think that's where Wolves are right now. They're just kind of hedging their bets, trying to figure out, like, where are we and are we okay? That's why a lot of, you see a lot of the rumors about guys like Pedro Neto and other players being up on offer in the summer from Wolves. And it's basically they need to take players and turn them into large profits, which is why Chelsea is looking to sell all the players that came out of their academy, because ultimately it's the easiest way for 100% profitability. So, everyone thinks that's the financial fair play rules. It's actually these profitability and sustainability rules that the Premier League put into place, which basically says you have to sell for a certain percentage of the money that you buy, but it's against what you spend. So for a team like Chelsea, who spent $1 billion with no money coming in, the only way they're going to balance the books is to sell homegrown talent, which is why, teams are lining up to try to steal Conor Gallagher and steal, Levi Colwell and these players from them. And they really may not even have a choice, which is ridiculous, because the whole point of financial fair play was supposed to be to balance it and allow smaller clubs to stay within their own means. And now the rules basically dictate that you should sell homegrown players to curtail the rules. But we could probably do an entire segment and an entire different show. But let's get to looking at match week 26 and a few of the key fixtures. This one starts with Liverpool versus Luton. They moved that match up to the Wednesday prior. That was the match scheduled for this weekend. So Liverpool stays on par with the rest of the Premier League teams playing 26 matches. Nothing to write home about in the first half. Really poor performance. Liverpool absolutely turned it on in the second half, playing without major stars in Darwin Núñez, Szoboszlai, Trent, Mo. How impressed were you with that second half performance against Luton? Was it more about what Liverpool did, or was it about what Luton stopped doing?
I felt like it was more what Liverpool did, turned it on, and I thought there was contributions from everybody across the board, and that I think that was really key. Like, I thought, we'll talk about it more when we talk about the final in our other pod, but I really thought that, like, the Van Dijk goal felt like the second of three really defining captain moments this season for him. Like, I feel like he's getting to the point. Like, I think that he's almost in the best form of his career right now, which is crazy to say, because not only is he back to being like just an absolute colossal across the back line, he's a threat piece. Like he's a threat on set pieces in a way that we haven't seen in a really long time. Like he's almost single-handedly demanding 2-3 players in a box on him and just creating a lot of havoc in there pretty consistently. So, yeah, it came from everywhere. Good to see Gakpo back in the mix. I just thought across the board, I thought it was really, really good performance. And Endo just keeps having banger after banger. I don't know, like, especially after this cup final, like, I don't know how he can play another match in quick succession, but, like, it's just been unreal to watch the last, like, 4 or 5 matches consistently machine-like with him back there.
Well, if the reports were true, he left Wembley actually on crutches in a boot. So he
Awesome.
Klopp may not be able to play the machine. I don't know if you saw Klopp's quote. He made some quote, I think, in the post-match. He's like, I don't know. I expect Endo to sign a long-term extension. I know the passport says he's 30, but he's built like a machine. That was his exact quote. Like, his passport might say 31, but he's built like a machine. And I don't think he's kidding. I think he is a little shocked. We talked about this. We didn't know if it was like a Klopp buy, a panic buy, and when he didn't play him a lot at the beginning, we kind of questioned it. We kept shoehorning McAllister, and we questioned it. It is funny now. McAllister has played forward 3 times, has a goal and 3 assists, and an XG of like over 2, which is basically higher than any midfielder we've had in like 4 years. Basically showing why he was the best player that we signed in the summer, and him moving forward and being the best player we signed in the summer has allowed the second best player we signed in the summer to be the most important piece that we need. I really, really hope that by the time we get to the City match in a couple weeks, that we have it to the point where we can start McAllister, Endo, and Jones. I genuinely think that's our best midfield right now. Balance all around the midfield I want to see. It also, I think, allows for the best attacking players to come off the bench, because now you can bring in Soboslai to change the match. And I think if Gravenberch is your 5th midfielder, you're doing really well for yourself, especially when Harvey Elliott's a better footballer. Speaking of Harvey Elliott, what a performance he had against Luton again. The kid's just doing it all in all. I think he just deserves all the credit in the world. Good on Liverpool staying top of the table. Arsenal, I mean, what else can we say about Arsenal right now? They are just absolutely throttling everyone. They basically score 3 first-half goals in every single match they play. Between Saka, Odegaard, and Martinelli, you could argue there's probably not 3 better in-form players in all of England at the moment. How far can this Arsenal side go?
I mean, they can, if they, the thing about Arsenal is always, can they keep it up, right? Can they consistently do it till the end of the year? We haven't seen them hit a whole lot of injuries yet, so they're still pretty healthy. If they can stay healthy, I think they got a real shot. Because I think Odegaard's a game changer. Saka is obviously in the form of his life. Kai Havertz is figuring it out. They lead the league in set piece goals. They're absolutely incredible from set pieces. So, I mean, that's the thing about them is they're not conceding, and they have more than one way to beat you. And anytime there's a team that puts those things together, they're always going to challenge.
Yeah, I feel like for all the reasons that people say Liverpool can win the league, you have to say Arsenal can win the league. Like, we talk about, they get goals from Diaz and Gakpo, and you're like, and they get goals from Trossard, and they get goals from Martinelli, and they get goals from Jesus, and they get goals from Nketiah, and they get goals from Emile Smith-Rowe if they actually play them. And then they chip in with Rice and Odegaard, and you really realize they can score from all over. Their defense has gotten better and better. They have a set pairing. I'm not a huge fan of Raya, the keeper, but I'm not the biggest fan of Ramsdale either. So it's not like I think they've done a huge drop off. I do think like their fullback play is where they could improve. And I think sometimes that's what lets them down. Ben White, Zinchenko, Tomiyasu, even. They've been trying to find those kind of dynamic elite fullbacks. I think that's why they tried to sign Jurrien Timber. And then he got injured, which was, another really smart, good signing by them that didn't work out. And they still have veterans like Jorginho and ridiculous old men like El Neni and these guys just doing jobs for them, right? Like coming out and like, I do think Arteta finally has them in a place where they understand their roles and their jobs. And I used to criticize them for being a little all over the place. And when times got tough, I thought his side showed his persona. And I feel like in some ways they're starting to show the positive side of his energy and his impact. And he's starting to really turn the corner with them. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they fall a little short, but I do think Arsenal might be in this for the long haul. Speaking of in this for the long haul, Manchester City, once again, not their best performance by any means. Bournemouth had great opportunities throughout the match, especially late with a few gilt-edged chances that they weren't able to turn in. Really good up-and-coming side that Bournemouth team is, especially going forward. Really fun to watch. But City does what they do. They get a goal. Bournemouth makes a mistake. Holland makes them pay. They score their goal, and they close shop up, and they hold on for 3 points. What is this more about here? Is this City starting to wobble, or is this City getting ready to go on one of their second half runs, winning matches they shouldn't?
I don't know, Gally. Honestly, don't. I was thinking after this match, I was thinking about how long this run of like sort of just them being really underwhelming has gone on. And I don't know, comparatively, because it always feels like they have one of these dips a year. But I don't remember it feeling like it went on this long. And so, it makes you wonder, do they have it in them to, turn it back on? Did they simply lose too much? Between Gundogan and Mahrez and, a lot of these peripheral pieces that they rotated in, but also got a lot of goals for them. You just kind of wonder if they lost too much. And, I do think KDB really helps them coming back because I think De Bruyne is one of the few players that consistently can dictate play through Holland comfortably, which is what they need to do to score the way that they're designed to score, just based on having Holland in the lineup. So I don't know. I don't see anything that tells me, hey, they're going to lock in and start clicking in a way that, we were accustomed to see them doing. I don't see it yet. So, I got to think at some point they're going to start dropping some of these games. I just don't know that you can continue to play the way that they've played and still get 3 points, even though we know that that's what they kind of excel at, is getting 3 points from their average, which is better than most people's best, right? So I just don't know. I don't know how long they can ride this because they've been riding their luck now for a while on these matches.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think they have a tough. They got to go on a run here. They got United on the weekend, which is never easy. Even this pitiful United side is never easy for City to play. It's always a derby, and they can always show up on any given day and give them at least a battle. Then they get us, and then they get Arsenal. They have a monster period of time here, and I think that's the real key for me. I think if you ask me why I feel confident, even with the injuries, that Liverpool can still finish top of the table is I really do believe that City has the harder fixtures the second half of the way. Arsenal and City still have to play each other, which, in an ideal world, that ends in a draw. They both drop 2 points, and we really push that forward there. I still think it's going to come down to one of the three teams coming down to the last couple weeks of the season. I think it's going to be right down to the wire because I think all sides are going to drop points. Nobody's running the table winning their last 12 fixtures, in my opinion. And if anyone was going to do it, I would probably think it might bode more for a Liverpool than it would for even Arsenal there. So I guess I'll end it here on the City context with this. Do you think it has more to do with the fact that KDB missed a good amount of time and therefore Haaland got off the boil? Or does it have a little bit to do with the fact that for the first time in Haaland's career here at City, he had both an injury and kind of a down patch in form? That coupled with not having KDB there almost led him to being lost on the pitch, because he looks like a B-rate striker right now, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he has a tendency. I mean, like, look, I think he's a generational talent, but when he's not good, I don't think it's ugly, right? I mean, I think we're so used to seeing him perform at such a high clip that we really haven't seen this. But I mean, remember when he played Liverpool in the Champions League, looked absolutely average. Disconnected, didn't seem that explosive, seemed disinterested at times, temperamental, all the things that we've seen him with City this year. And so I think it's a number that we talked about that, right? Like, this dude going up hasn't really seen a whole lot of adversity, right? So, like, what does it look like when he does see it, right? And I think we're finding out. I definitely think the injury had something to do with it, but I also think him being in a more physical league with harder competitions had something to do with it. So, I mean, we're really going to see what happens here. I think City lost some pieces that they couldn't replace. I really think Mahrez was a big part of what they did and a big part of their success, and I think a lot of people didn't see that. Maybe they didn't either. But I think they lost a lot. I think this is the thinnest City squad we've seen in a long time. I think they're also getting older. I think it's a combination of a lot of those things going together. It'll be really interesting to see how this thing plays out for them the rest of the year.
So if we take a look here quickly at the table as we start to wrap up before previewing next week's matches, everyone in the league outside of Tottenham and Chelsea have played the full 26 matches on offer. Tottenham and Chelsea will make that match up later on in the season because, well, neither of them have Europe to worry about, so there's plenty of time for that match. Liverpool, 60 points, City 59, Arsenal 58, and goal difference 38, 33, 39. That looks about as tight as it can be. Can it end that tight, or do you see this end up being a two-team race by the end of the season?
Oh, I think the bottom half of this league is weak enough that it can finish that tight. And I think that's what's really interesting about it. I think there's like, I don't know that this league has outside of the top, which is interesting because it's been the converse for so long. There's been no parity at the top, but there's been a lot of parity anywhere in between, like 2 and 20, right? I think this is kind of the year where we see the exception to the rule. We've talked about like the Premier weakening over time, and I do think that like the bottom half of this table is weak enough where like these three teams should be able to really snowball a lot of points.
So that last top four spot, Villa, Tottenham, United. Obviously, Tottenham's got their match in hand, and so if they were to be able to secure 3 points against Chelsea, when that match gets replayed, they'd be within 2 points of Villa, right there fighting. And United, tough loss for them against Fulham on the weekend, losing it late, really denting their hopes at a top four finish. Is it Villa's to lose at this point? Do you give Tottenham the non-Europe fighting chance and maybe having a few more goal scorers? Like, where do you see that Villa-Tottenham battle rolling out, knowing
I mean, it's very possible that, I think it's very possible that Villa's a few key injuries away from, dropping points, right? I also think that Tottenham is probably not far away from finding a way to score more goals. Like, I think, those two scenarios could very well play out. But, I mean, I'll tell you, Villa has done nothing for me to convince me that they're going to stop scoring. And they play just enough they play just enough defense to make this thing stable for the rest of that team. And then I think Unai Emery is just – I think he's really, really underrated in what he does tactically, especially in how he sets up a midfield. And I think if you have a manager that knows how to set up a midfield across multiple tactics, across multiple fixtures in the league. I think that you got yourself a situation that's real hard to get points off you. And I think with Villa scoring the way they're scoring, I think it's real difficult for teams to go up against them. I think they're the one. I think them and Arsenal are probably the two sides right now nobody wants to see.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there at all. It'll be interesting to see as it gets tight late. Obviously, that stadium, both stadiums are wonderful venues. Obviously, Tottenham's world-class Palace and Villa, people forget that it's the second largest stadium in all of England. And, when Wembley was under renovation, they played the National League game. The men's national team games in England were played at Villa Park. It is a massive stadium with a massive fan base. It would be great for football to see Villa get back to the Champions League, even just to be back fighting for European honors. I still think that, Villa's going to try their hardest to win that Europa Conference League just because it's a European trophy, and we saw what it did for West Ham to kick on last year and win that. And I just think that might be a little bit too much to ask as the season gets tighter and it gets towards the money end of the season. And maybe that hurts them a little bit. Real quick here, bottom half of the top half, Brighton, West Ham, Wolves, Newcastle. All of them have an outside argument to say we could fight to catch United in 6 or get ourselves into that 6-7 spot for Europe. Which of those 4 teams, Newcastle, Wolves, West Ham, Brighton, do you think has the best chance of playing European football next season?
Oh, man. I think the team with the best chance right now, I'll go West Ham. This may be recency bias because they look so good today, but I know they've struggled. But I think that they're good enough defensively that they can build off of that, and then they've got pieces that score goals. So I like that combination. Newcastle to me is just far too inconsistent. They've got the extra competition. They've got injury issues. I don't think they've looked really the same since Joelinton was out. So I think if I have to pick, Wolves, I think, is on the downward slide. Brighton is, they haven't figured it out all year, and they don't look – they are once again up and down. I have to say the best side, I think, out of those 4, I think West Ham is the one for me that could pull out of that sort of bottom pack and get up there and challenge for one of those European spots.
Yeah, I think West Ham is it. I think I disagree with you. I think Wolves is a little bit on the sneaky good side. I mean, I think they've secured more points over since Gary O'Neill's been in charge, he clearly has them playing a style, and Pedro Neto changes everything with them. And if him and Wang are playing well together with Sarabia and Cunha, they can score some goals now. And that was always the question, what Wolves would do. I don't think Wolves are going to qualify for Europe, but I think Wolves and West Ham have every bit of the right to believe they can get up near United. And I think Brighton knows what's happening. I think Brighton knows that there was a great season last year. They have an opportunity to do something semi-special and try to take a run in the Europa League. And I think that's why they're focusing on Europe and they're not focusing on the league. I think they also know their manager is gone at the end of the season, and 2 or 3 of their top talent is going with him at the end of the season. It may not be to the club he's going to, but, Ferguson is linked with Arsenal today. And Cisco's been injured and still being linked with City. There are big moves coming, I think, for some of Brighton's top talent. And then before you know it, João Pedro will go somewhere else and Adinga will be on to somewhere else. And, they'll be back down to Lewis Dunk. They'll still be rolling out. Yeah, it'll be, that's how Sully March gets a start every 2.5 seasons. They're like, it's your year, Sully. You're starting, Sully. Before you know it, we'll be back in the championship. No, Brighton's a very good side, doing a very good thing, but I just don't think they're going to be able to withstand it. So let's take a look at the bottom of the table, and then we'll get out with a little preview for next week. There's a whole lot of red there down at the bottom. we're looking at Sheffield United, Burnley, Luton. Man, that Luton loss at home to Sheffield United, their only road victory of the year a few weeks back, is really, really brutal right now, especially after Everton had those points given back to them. How big would it be for Luton to have 3 more points right now in the bank? Are we going to see the same 3 teams that came up go right back down now that Everton's been awarded those points back, or Forest or Brentford still got something you think to fight for here?
I think Forest has got enough in the tank. I'm worried about Brentford, though. I mean, Ivan Toney came back immediately and started scoring goals, but they still just don't look right. Like, I think it's just a disjointed side. I don't know if some of the Frank Thomas magic is rubbing going away. I don't know if they didn't put enough Danes into this year's squad, but yeah, it's just not clicking in the same way it does. I think anytime you're relying on Neil Maupay for goals, you're in a bad spot to begin with. So I think, yeah, I think Brentford, if they don't get it figured out, they're gonna be down there and they're gonna make it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as Forest don't have any points deducted from them, I think they'll be in good shape. I think if they were to be given a 4 or 6 point deduction, that might be hard for them to overcome, because I do think Luton is going to bloody a few more noses before the end of this thing. They played the big boys well enough, and I think if it gets late and Luton literally needs to just smash and claw, 1-1 draws on the road, I think they can get a draw against Fulham. I think they can get a draw against Chelsea. I think they can beat a Wolves if they had to. I don't know that Burnley or Sheffield United can do that. And to be honest, I think Forest has shown some real flashes of being a better footballing side under Nuno. I don't know that helps them stay up if they end up in a relegation battle. And you saw it against, on the weekend, they concede 4 to Villa. They're down 2-0 within 10 minutes. You're just not going to be able to compete that way, because what Forest needs is to keep games 0-0, play the ball long to Iwoni, have him knock the ball down, play off of Gibbs White, and then score goals off Dominguez. I mean, it's ultimately they have 2-3 attacking players. That's it. And maybe a little Callum Hudson-Odoi out on the wing now that he's getting a little bit back to form, and Ilanga. They just got a bunch of other Premier League teams castaways and 800 fullbacks from across Europe. And we wonder why they're struggling to sit right outside the relegation zone. It'll be interesting there. If you could pick one team out of this bottom half to either watch play or you believe has a chance in the next couple of years to become a good footballing side, maybe in this league, compete for something, who is it? Who is the Brighton of a few years past in this bottom half?
Well, I think if you're looking at the bottom half, the team that's like this is going to be a cop-out. The team that most likely to compete for titles or anything is going to be Chelsea, right?
Chelsea.
I think – so I don't think they're going to be able to keep them in place, but I think Crystal Palace has a fascinating group of young talent, especially offensively, across the board. They have several really nice players. But I think right now probably most fun to watch is between Bournemouth and actually Forest. I think both those teams are actually a lot of fun to watch, but like you said, I think Forest is so open at the back. It causes issues for them, especially if they're in a relegation scrap. Bournemouth has done better, a little bit better defensively, but I still think they're a fun team to watch. Offensively, both those teams like to open it up.
I'm a big fan of the Bournemouth manager, and I'm a fan of the players. My fear is that Solanke will get lured to a bigger club with a real offer this offseason, because he's proven – last season he got double-digit goals. I think it was 10 or 11. This year he's proven it's more than just being able to score goals. He's a Premier League striker. And I think when you do that, a club like West Ham comes in and pays big money, and you say, I'd like to go live in London, or, who knows, maybe even Arsenal misses out on Ivan Toney, or United comes calling. Somebody bigger comes, and I think he goes. I still think he would have been the perfect signing for Spurs, when they wanted a Harry Kane replacement. I don't know they want that anymore, because I think they've feel like they have that with Brendan Johnson and with Richarlison. But I could see Solanke getting a move, and I think that could really hurt Bournemouth, because I think when you have a striker like that, who's basically the identity of the club, you need to keep them at all, however, at all means necessary. So let's look quickly next week. Obviously, we will spend a lot of time on next week's show talking about the Manchester Derby when City host United. That is Sunday at 10:30. We also have Liverpool Forest. Obviously, that will be important to us. And then maybe the other one here that jumps out, if anything, maybe that West Ham Everton, just because Everton, seeing how they respond after the points deduction. What jumps out at you here? What do you see? What are you thinking for next weekend?
I mean, obviously the City United one is the one that pops out the most. I'll be most interested in that. I think Wolves and Newcastle is a big game for both those clubs. Like massive game, considering where both of those are on the table and what that means to those clubs and try to stay in the European comps. So I think that's the other one I'd look at.
Perfect. Well, we are back, folks. We apologize again for our hiatus. If you have not already, please head on over. Get into the YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel today, get all the updates, you get all the programming, you get the Premier League show, our shorts, you can watch the coffee morning shows on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as well as the Monday and Thursday podcast, the fantasy shows, and everything in between. We'll be sharing more content regarding our new Patreon site, as well as enhancements to the website. So please keep an eye out for all of the news. As always, for myself and Bickler, thank you for joining us this week for the Premier League show. We will be back next week, and we will review match week 27. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.